Excellencies, good morning. Thank you to Columbia and to Security Council President Ambassador Zalabata for convening this very important debate. Thank you also to the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict, Vanessa Frazier, and to the Civil Society representative for their briefings. Excellencies, a school, a hospital, a water point should never be a battlefield, and no child should have to wonder whether entering a classroom or health facility might cost her life. Yet for millions of children living through conflict, that is precisely the reality they face every single day. The Secretary General's latest report on children in armed conflict documents 38,558 verified grave violations against children in 2025. Behind that number are children killed and maimed, recruited and used by armed forces and armed groups, abducted, subjected to sexual violence, denied humanitarian assistance, and deprived of education, health, and protection. These alarming figures tell only part of the story. Many more violations go unreported because of insecurity, access constraints, fear of reprisals, and the immense challenges of documenting abuses in active war zones. These figures show that protections for children under international law are being violated more often and at greater cost. The report also highlights a deeply troubling development. For the first time, government forces and affiliated actors are responsible for more grave violations against children than non-state armed groups. This finding should alarm every member state represented in this chamber. States have a responsibility to uphold the legal and policy frameworks that protect children, to ensure that their forces comply with international law, and to investigate and hold those responsible for grave violations to account. We must act with the urgency and consistency that this reality demands. In my missions with UNICEF, I have met children who have fled their homes and communities because of conflict, children who witnessed the killing of family members, friends, neighbors, and girls who were subjected to horrific sexual violence by armed actors. Their experiences remind us that every verified violation in this report represents a child whose safety, dignity, and future have been profoundly affected. Excellencies, the report identifies several other deeply concerning trends. First, children continue to be killed and maimed at staggering levels by explosive weapons in populated areas. In 2025, almost 70% of child casualties were caused by explosive weapons. The highest numbers were verified in Ukraine, Afghanistan, Myanmar, Israel and the State of Palestine, and Lebanon. In addition to causing harm, these weapons destroy schools, hospitals, water systems, power networks, and other civilian infrastructure essential for children's survival and recovery. They leave behind unexploded ordnance that can continue to kill and maim children years after hostilities have ended. Parties to conflict must protect civilians and must not use explosive weapons in populated areas. States must strengthen, not weaken, the international frameworks designed to protect civilians, including children. A second alarming trend is the growing number of children subjected to multiple grave violations. In 2025, this number increased again to more than 3,100 children. This means that a child has had several terrible things happen to them. They are abducted or recruited, and in many cases also subjected to rape or other forms of sexual violence. For girls in particular, abduction is often not a single violation. It marks the beginning of a prolonged, horrific cycle of abuse, exploitation, and social exclusion upon release. Children who survive these experiences require sustained protection, recovery, reintegration, and survivor-centered support. They also deserve accountability. A third major source of concern is the alarming rise in the denial of humanitarian access. In 2025, the United Nations verified more than 8,000 incidents involving restrictions on humanitarian operations, attacks on humanitarian personnel and assets, and interference with the delivery of assistance. The highest numbers were verified in Israel and the State of Palestine, Libya, and Ukraine. When humanitarian access is denied, children are deprived of healthcare, nutrition, education, protection services, and other forms of life-saving support. In addition, humanitarian workers themselves are increasingly under attack. Most of those killed, injured, or detained are local humanitarian workers on the front lines of crises in their own communities. Parties to conflict must facilitate safe, timely, and unimpeded access for humanitarian actors. Member states must use their influence to safeguard principled humanitarian action and to ensure respect for international humanitarian law. Excellencies, the report points to a broader challenge, that the nature of warfare is rapidly evolving. The increased use of drones, autonomous and remotely operated systems, and artificial intelligence-supported targeting raises serious concerns, especially when these technologies and weapons are used in populated areas where children live, learn, and seek care. Beyond the immediate risk of death or injury, drones can also have severe psychological impacts on children. The constant, terrifying presence of drones can deprive children of any sense of safety as they go to school or play or try to sleep. As the nature of warfare evolves, our commitment to protecting children must remain steadfast, and we must ensure that safeguards for children are upheld. Excellencies, even amid these troubling trends, there are some reasons for hope. The Children in Armed Conflict agenda continues to demonstrate that progress is possible. In 2025, more than 13,000 children left armed forces or armed groups. These children received reintegration and protection support from UNICEF and our partners. Governments and non-state armed groups engaged with the United Nations. They negotiated commitments, implemented preventive measures, and took steps to release children and prevent future violations. In Colombia, for example, the government has strengthened prevention measures against recruitment and use, sexual violence, and attacks affecting education. These efforts include the adoption of prevention strategies and guidelines for school risk management and education in emergencies. In Haiti, authorities launched initiatives to prevent recruitment by armed groups and to support the reintegration of affected children. And in Syria, the government has committed to preventing the recruitment and use of children and is working with the United Nations on strengthening its protection commitments. Important engagements also continued in Mozambique, Libya, Somalia, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ethiopia, Yemen, South Sudan, and Sudan. These examples remind us that the CAC framework works when there is political will, when there is sustained engagement, and when humanitarians are given the support, access, and protection that they need. Excellencies, allow me to conclude with 6 recommendations. First, member states must use their influence to ensure that all parties to conflict adhere to their obligations to respect international humanitarian law and international human rights law. In light of the information in this report, no one can plead ignorance about the impact of war on children. Political, military, financial, and other forms of support should be informed by robust assessments to the risks of children. Where risks are identified, support should be accompanied by concrete measures to prevent, mitigate, and address harm. Excuse me. States should also avoid transferring weapons when there is a clear risk that they could be used to commit or enable grave violations against children. Second, all parties in conflict must take concrete steps to protect children. This includes protecting schools, students, teachers, and education personnel, ending attacks on education, refraining from the military use of schools, issuing clear command orders to protect education, and ensuring accountability for violations. Parties listed in the Secretary General's report must engage with the United Nations to adopt and implement action plans to prevent and end grave violations without delay. Third, children associated with armed forces must be treated primarily as victims. They should be released promptly and transferred to civilian child protection actors for care, family reunification, and reintegration. Fourth, the Security Council must continue to defend and strengthen the Children in Armed Conflict agenda. This includes preserving the monitoring and reporting mechanism, ensuring that decisions remain evidence-based, maintaining a timely and fully functioning working group, and using all available tools to press parties to engage with the agenda and protect children. Fifth, member states must safeguard humanitarian action. The rise in attacks on humanitarian personnel and the increasing denial of humanitarian access is appalling and should prompt urgent action by this Council. Finally, member states should strengthen the legal and policy frameworks that protect children in armed conflict. This requires continued commitment to treaties that have helped reduce civilian harm, including the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention and the Convention on Cluster Munitions. This also includes continued support for the range of international instruments to protect children, including the Safe Schools Declaration, the Political Declaration on the Use of Explosive Weapons in Populated Areas, the Paris Principles, the Vancouver Principles, and the Declaration for the Protection of Humanitarian Personnel. Excellencies, at a time when children are facing unprecedented levels of harm in conflict, the Children in Armed Conflict agenda needs strong political and financial support. Funding cuts are weakening child protection capacities precisely when needs are growing. They are reducing support for children affected by grave violations, including family tracing and reunification, mental health and psychosocial support, reintegration services, survivor-centered care, and safe access to education and health care. Protecting children cannot be a peripheral concern of peace and security. It must be central to it. Excellencies, I've said this to you all before. Children do not start wars, and they are powerless to stop them. They die, they suffer, and they bear the scars of war for decades. We owe them more than that. We owe them a world where war is left to combatants and children are free to grow and learn and dream in peace. Is that really asking too much? Thank you very much.